I would choose my 40s and thus far my 50s over my 20s and 30s any day of the week. You know, you finally start to feel like you know something, and also you just start to care less. I'm 50 years old, whatever. I'm never going to go shopping for a bikini again. I've never worn a bikini in my life, and I don't care. So many narratives around trauma are that you experience trauma, you get help, and then you're freed of it. And I'm sure that is a narrative that works for some people, but that has not been my experience. One of the things that has helped me over the years is also just recognizing that sometimes you don't get over it. Sometimes you just learn to live with it, and that's not a failing. And that was very freeing. Just allowing myself to do photo shoots, to go on TV, not things I ever would have imagined having to do as a writer. I do it mostly to show other people, don't let them force you into a corner. Don't make them hide from the world, because the only person who's harmed when you hide from the world is you.
Welcome, Roxane.
Thank you, Elisa.
I'm honored to have you here. Our audience is a big millennial and Gen Z audience. And in particular, I know that because I've created StyleLikeU with my daughter. And you are an icon and have had a tremendous influence on their lives, including hers. And so I really appreciate you taking the time. And I just wanted to say congratulations on your new book.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. It's been great to see people engaging with the book. You know, you work on it for years and then it's out of your hands.
That must be a very intense experience that you've had many times.
It is. It's a good experience, certainly, but it is very intense, especially when you're an introvert and you don't like talking. That's why I'm a writer. But it's also not something I take for granted, because I know how hard it is to sell books and to get people to connect with your work. So even though it can be a bit challenging, I enjoy it. I do.
I'm fascinated that you're an introvert and yet you did a TED Talk and you speak a lot. And I'm actually, I would say, probably more of an extrovert, but I have a lot of anxiety around my voice and speaking. And I admire and look up to people when I see them speaking, and especially when they're not being asked questions, but they have to get up there and just speak. That seems daunting.
It can be. It can definitely be daunting. And I am afraid of public speaking, even though I do it with alarming frequency. But, you know, sometimes you just have to recognize, okay, this is terrifying, but I have to do it anyway. So here we go. And I just do my best.
And is that what you say to yourself? Is that how you do it and stay grounded, is giving yourself permission to just be yourself and not have to be a perfectionist?
Well, I am a perfectionist, but I also know that when it comes to public speaking in particular, perfection isn't necessarily the goal. And I would say that for almost anything, that perfection isn't necessarily my goal, and instead excellence is. And so I just try to bring my full self, and I try to be as present as possible. And I just recognize that one of the joys and the challenges of live events is that anything can and does happen. And so I just try to be prepared for that.
Mm-hmm. And when you say excellence, what do you mean?
I mean, talk about interesting ideas, do it well. You know, some people, especially writers, don't necessarily know how to read their work in public, and it requires sometimes some practice. And so I just try to be prepared wherever I go, because if people are going to share the gift of their time, their very valuable time, then I'm going to do the best to make sure that their time is well spent.
And what do you tell yourself if you feel like you've made a mistake or things haven't gone exactly as you wanted through the process? Are you able to just accept that that's okay too?
I acknowledge the mistake if necessary and move on. There's nothing you can do about it right now. And I try to be as forgiving with myself as possible, though that is challenging because I'm a perfectionist. But mistakes happen. And the older I get, the less afraid I am of mistakes, because in general, I do learn from it eventually. I just recognize it's not the end of the world. It just isn't. So many other things are far worse.
Right. I was thinking about Bad Feminist and, in a way, how it relates to not being hard on yourself, which is part of patriarchy, part of the problem of everything is just how we're all programmed to look outside of ourselves, for perfection or external validation rather than looking inside and being connected internally and feeling that you're enough and coming from that place. And I feel you gave permission around a very important topic.
I tried. I mean, I wish I could take my own advice, but I did want to create a space, especially in feminist conversations, for people to be human, to be flawed, and to still be committed to their feminism. And I think I did that. Of course, you can't control how people are going to engage with your work. And unfortunately, I think some people misunderstood a lot of the ideas in Bad Feminist and decided that it was kind of like a hall pass for whatever they want to do. And no, that's not quite it. But that's okay too. I mean, you just can't control what people are going to take from your work.
Mm-hmm. That's hard. I mean, just putting yourself out there is a risk, and
it's a scary risk, and especially because people online tend to be ungenerous. Especially, I think, in progressive spaces. And I get why. A lot of what we're up against is existential. And so we need all hands on deck, and we need to be like the best versions of ourselves. We're fighting for things that are so fundamentally important that we kind of expect each other to be perfect, to always say the right things, to always account for every reality and everything we say. And it is not sustainable, and it's not even possible. And I just always hope, and I include myself in this, that we can all be a little more generous with each other and give each other the benefit of the doubt that perhaps when someone makes a mistake, they are not doing so with malicious intent. They're just doing so because they're human. We don't all have to be hammers in search of nails. But it's hard. Online engagement rewards negative engagement.
I mean, one of the things that's been preeminent on my mind is now the level of the existential crisis right now is so in our faces in such a gigantic way, and all the shadows and veil, everything is out, is how to respond. What is being asked of us in addition to caring so much and action, but where is it coming from? I just know for myself personally, I feel that having been someone who's been in fight or flight most of my life, that this is actually a moment where I shouldn't be. That for me to be my best self right now and have the most impact is to be regulated. And that collectively, so that, ultimately what the impact that I can have will have more significance and not be a burnout.
Yeah, and I think that's incredibly important for all of us to try and practice right now, because we're in a marathon. It is not a sprint. And one of the things that we have seen over the past 100 and so days since Trump took office is that they are trying to flood the zone with every manner of bullshit you can possibly imagine. They are attacking every single democratic norm. They are dismantling the government piece by piece and then selling it off for parts. And they're doing so without really much resistance. Certainly, activists are resisting. And we're seeing some amazing protests happening, both with Tesla takedown and a few other movements that are gaining quite a lot of momentum and are very encouraging. But in general, our elected officials are kind of just like, we're not the majority. What can we do? And that means that the onus is on us to save ourselves, because
Exactly.
this many times, no one's coming to save us. And the best way to save ourselves is to make sure that we sustain the fight, the resistance that we can put up. And that means taking care of ourselves. That means making space for joy. That means taking our time. You see a lot of times on social media, people will say, just like, pick one thing to care about. And truly, that really is a great piece of advice. You cannot wrap your mind around everything that they're doing. It's just a lot. And so I just try every day to just focus. I'm always paying attention. I do read the news. I don't watch television news because it's too... I prefer to read my news, I'll say. And I think that on television news, they tell you the news and then they repeat it 100 times, and then they have a bunch of giggling fucking pundits come on and act like they're at a tea party or a cocktail hour
Right.
while talking about really horrific things. And so I find that if I can just sort of keep my news read, that way I can process it in my own time, and then just like sort of get angry about one thing a day, even though that is a little hard for me. It just helps to not to. I can't do it all.
I think it's really true. You have to pick what you are going to put your focus on, and small choices are big ones. I think if
Absolutely.
everybody decides to step into something that maybe they wouldn't have before, that's going to make a really big difference. And at the same time, going back to what we were saying just about inner self, I just think no one is going to save us. And I think that is part of the message of this moment, is that we are our own heroes. We're moving into a new era, ultimately, I believe, and we're leaving a dark ages. And how we navigate that and how we understand ourselves and our own power, and to realize that we are so much more than that inside and all connected and all of these things is very important for the ultimate winning of the good guys. So, speaking of the connection between inner and outer expression, I think that you have incredible style. I love the ties and the suits that I've seen you in, even what you wore in the TED Talk. I think you have great style and a great connection to your style. And I'd love to hear about what it means to you.
Literally, no one has ever said that to me in my life. I tend to have a uniform. I generally wear a black t-shirt and jeans, dark jeans at that, every day. And for a lot of reasons, but it's just easy. And then when I do on-stage events, I'll wear a nice blazer. I have an amazing tailor named Emily Meyer, and she makes a mean lesbian suit. But she'll make a suit for anyone. But I don't know what my style says about me other than that I believe in utilitarianism.
I love
And
that. I
this,
mean, I get it. Uniform and just whatever feels like second skin to you.
absolutely. And like, it's what makes me feel comfortable. I wouldn't say that it necessarily feels like armor, but it does feel like at least I know who I am. I am prepared for whatever the world is going to throw my way today because I'm in my uniform. And so that helps.
I know. And I think actually people look amazing in uniforms. I always feel that when I see people in uniforms, they have like the best style compared to everybody else, especially now.
Appreciate style, like, looking at designers, and I like fashionable things. But hey, designers don't make clothes for fat people. So, like, the other part of the answer is, like, what's my style? My style is whatever the fuck is available because most designers don't make anything for fat people, period. And it's a shame. I don't understand why they're leaving so much money on the table, but it's not for me to understand.
Well, it's all part of the same problem, which is what we're about. It's connected to exploiting insecurities. And obviously, we're in a bad backlash of it all right now.
Indeed.
Have you always had such a connection to your uniform and your expression that way?
I would say it's probably the past 6 or 7 years. Before, first of all, couldn't really afford much. just it's just reality. And so I would just wear whatever I could find. And I also couldn't find clothing in my size. If you look in my closet, it looks kind of psychotic. It's just stacks of dark jeans and stacks of black t-shirts. And like, it works. It works.
I think that
Um,
is style to me. Like my pet peeves right now, among a million other things, is just the bullshit of, influencers thinking that they're talking about style or inspiring people to have style and they never wear the same thing. And everything they're wearing, or most of it, is stuff that gets thrown away in a landfill or disintegrates in, 5 or 6 wears. Knowing what is for you, I think that is style.
Yes, absolutely. And, it's always interesting to see someone who's like clearly at home in their clothes. No matter what those clothes are, I find it to be very comforting. My wife is like one of those people who's very, very stylish and fashion forward. And she just wears it with just such confidence. I'm always just like, please bottle that up.
Really, because I know for myself, it is literally something that saved my life. It's an expression of all the broken pieces getting put back together again and not giving a shit what anyone thinks.
Mm-hmm.
Like all the things that broke me apart and gluing it back together and basically fuck you. So, anyway, so is there something that you rejected about yourself that you felt shame around, that you didn't like or love about yourself, that once you embraced it became a power?
Not yet. I wish though. Not yet.
Why do you say that?
I think like most people, I just struggle to see myself in a positive light, and it's not that I don't hate myself by any stretch of the imagination, but I just am like, here I am. So I have yet to really like turn around any of the things that I've had low self-esteem around. But I aspire to it. We'll see. We never know.
What are those things?
Oh, I mean, the list is so long. I actually don't think I am particularly stylish at all, but I don't, I'm also not like crying about it. I wish I was more confident. I think like most people, I wish that I was better at, I wouldn't say better at friendship. I'm a good friend, but I am terrible at communication. And so I always just like wait for my friends to reach out to me, which makes it seem one-sided, but it's like, it's a whole thing. Like, oh, I don't want to bother you. But like, so it's always just
You don't
like,
want to take up space.
yeah, I struggle to take up space. And so I would love to be able to turn that around in the next 50 years of my life. Well, I hope I'm not alive for 50 more years, but in the next, say, 35 years.
I understand that feeling of like that you would matter and that people want to hear from you. So what would you say then, because you've had so much success with your writing and you are a very accomplished person, and thought leader and have had a big influence on the culture. So what would you say has been your biggest struggle what has been your biggest struggle to get to that place? Like what is the thing that, what has that journey been?
Well, I mean, I don't know. That's a good question. I think the biggest struggle is, again, just allowing myself to take up space, whether it's on the page or in any given room. And I have been able to, fortunately, find a way of being afraid of doing things and just doing it anyway. And that has served me very well. But I still, sometimes I think I'm my own worst enemy in terms of just doing the thing I want to do and not caring what other people will think. And so I think the biggest obstacle has been myself and just caring too much about what other people think to just do the things that I want to do, how I want to do them.
Can you give an example?
I tend to write for myself. I tend to tell myself, girl, don't worry, no one's going to read it, so that I can say what I want to say on the page. But it becomes increasingly difficult to maintain that facade as you develop an audience and a following, and people tend to start to expect certain things from you. And I struggle with not wanting to people please because that's just my nature. And I never want to people please as a writer, ever. I just want to say what I want to say. Because when you try to like get everyone to like you or engage with you positively, you're not actually saying anything of import. You have to be ruffling feathers and not just being provocative for the sake of provocation, but if you're really saying interesting things, you're not going to have a universal agreement with your ideas. And I don't want universal agreement with my ideas, but sometimes I hold myself back when I worry too much about the different ways in which people are going to tear something apart. I write the piece, but I may not send it out. Then I just get angry at myself because like, why am I sitting around worrying about what Joe 437 thinks about my thoughts on democracy? Like, who cares? But it's just hard to overcome that reticence.
Right. But clearly you are doing it because.
I do it. I just like I hold back a lot. I have a lot of pieces that I just never send to my editor. And so yeah, I just happen to write a lot.
What's your fear?
I think like most writers, you just always fear, oh, if I make a mistake, I'm going to lose everything. That's my fear. I mean, I think that's most people's fear professionally, especially in the
Hmm.
creative fields. And especially when you look at what's going on, you're just always afraid like one day there won't be any readers left. And then what do I do? I mean, I get another job, but still, I think most writers are used to precarity.
I can understand that in terms of the amount of times with my own career that I've gone to the top and then back to the beginning and to the top and the beginning and all the new beginnings. You feel like, is anyone ever going to be there? And you must feel that way each time you write a book. I don't know. I feel like the only way to really be the biggest in the world is to take the step into your truth and take the risk.
Yeah, you definitely do. And nothing really great happens without taking risks. And clearly, I've taken risks over the course of my career, and I will continue to do so. But the older I get, the more, and I think this is just also part of aging. When you're young, you don't even know what's at stake when you take risks. You're
Hmm.
just like, well, I'm 25. I can do whatever.
Right.
When you're 50, it's slightly different because you do start to realize exactly what's at stake when you take risks. And so taking risks becomes a bit more challenging.
Yeah. Right. I've kind of been feeling, I mean, I'm a lot older than you. I'm 67 and I feel actually differently. I feel like I'm kind of growing up in a way still in terms of finally having the courage to take the risks and not give
Mhm.
a shit. And I look forward to the outcome of that. Um, how are you feeling about your new book in terms of these feelings?
Oh, well, look, with
Is
the
this
new,
vulnerable right now for you?
no, not the new book. The new book is a feminist reader. And so I'm very proud of it. And I worked on it for years. And I'm super glad it's out in the world. But it's not like memoir or an essay collection.
Hmm.
It's really an anthology of other people's writing, which is it was great to focus on someone else and get out of my own head for a while. And of course I
Mm.
wrote the introduction and I wrote these little like head notes for each of the pieces and some recommended reading at the back, but it was just great to not have to be the primary focus for the project. I actually have only written one memoir, and I suspect I will only have ever written one memoir, but this project's focus was so different and I really appreciated that, and I'm very glad that people are enjoying the book and engaging with the book.
It's super exciting. And what about insecurities? Like what would you say your biggest insecurity has been?
Leaving my house every day, when you live in a fat body in a cruel world, you just never know, like, okay, what am I going to have to deal with today? Who's going to be mean today? Who's going to say something weird? Who's going to just stare too long or whatever? And so it makes you very self-conscious. Even though you're not the problem, they are. But it's hard to remember that when you're
Hmm.
actually dealing with an aggressively fat phobic world.
And what's been your process with that? Do you feel that you've come to a stronger place within yourself over time?
No, I don't. I think that I just deal with it because I don't have a choice. It just is what it is. But I also talk about it a lot in therapy. And fortunately, I have a very good therapist, which helps.
Hmm. And it hasn't. So there isn't for other people, for viewers. There any insight you can give in terms of your own overcoming or process with all of this? Because obviously it's a big problem for a lot of people.
Uh, I mean, I'll let you know when I overcome it. It's just,
Or,
I,
it's an overcoming not fully, but just like your steps you've taken or.
the thing I try to remind myself is that, when you're overly self conscious, you're thinking about you way more than anyone else is. And so sometimes it really helps to remind yourself of that. Like, just because you have these insecurities doesn't mean that people are thinking about them. They might be just staring at you because there's a bird standing on your head or whatever. And so I always try to remind myself, like, I don't have to apologize for being here. I don't have to change a single thing about myself to be in this space. And that is a
Hmm.
thing that I have to constantly remind myself of. And some days are better than others in terms of really internalizing and believing that.
That's absolutely true. You don't have to apologize at all. And it's really just an unlearning. It's going back to who you are and not the imprint of what you've been told you are.
Yes, for sure. And, you don't have to let other people define you and who you are. And most of the time when people are making those kinds of judgments about you, they're saying far more about themselves than they ever could be saying about you. And that isn't necessarily a comfort, but it is a truth.
I mean, is it not a comfort just to know that it's only coming from their own projection?
No, I don't find it particularly comforting because it doesn't lessen the impact of unkindness, but it is a useful reminder nonetheless.
And what would you say has been a great choice that you've made or a decision that you've made towards self love?
I think just allowing myself to do photo shoots, to go on TV, things like that. These are not things I ever would have imagined having to do as a writer. And I often decline the opportunities because I don't want to do them. I'm a writer for a reason. But I still do allow myself to do them on occasion. And I just tell myself, they came to you. Someone somewhere thinks that you are worth filming or taking a photo of. And so instead of being full of fear and doubt, just, maybe embrace that you've earned this.
And you're doing that for your younger self?
No, my younger self would be so angry at the number of photo shoots I've had to endure. I think I'm doing it just to show other fat women that we exist and we don't have to make ourselves smaller. And even though it's hard to believe that every day, I do believe that. And it doesn't necessarily make it easier to be in the world, but it is it's true. And so I do it mostly to show other people, like, don't let them force you into a corner. Don't make them hide from the world, because the only person who's harmed when you hide from the world is you.
Did you do that when you were younger?
I think so. I think I hid from the world quite a lot. And I also think I was making the best decision I could for myself at the time. I was being very self protective. And yeah, I don't judge myself for it.
What were you hiding from? What was happening?
I was gang raped. And so I decided to, I'm not sure it was conscious or unconscious, but I just decided, like, if I make myself bigger, I'll be safer. Looking back, I'm like, that's some flawed thinking. But, when you're traumatized, you're not really thinking in a rational way. And also, food was comforting. Food was right there. It was abundant. It could have been alcohol. It could have been drugs. It could have been anything. Like, self-medication is self-medication.
I'm so sorry to hear that, and I really appreciate you sharing that. Can you talk a little bit about that experience and your process of healing from that experience?
Yeah. In many ways, like, it happened a long time ago now. It happened when I was 12. And so it was a lifetime ago. But that's what's so pernicious about sexual violence, and even just violence in general, is that sometimes the trauma lasts a lifetime and it completely warps who you were. It makes you into a different person. And then you are plagued with wondering, who would I have been had this thing not happened? And so it took a long time to stop asking myself that question and just recognize I'll never know. And it doesn't matter. Instead, I've just tried to focus on, this is who I am now. And I just have to deal with that. And also lots and lots of therapy over the years, off and on. So just the kinds of normal things you talk about in therapy about around sexual violence, and learning to not blame yourself and finding ways of managing the shame and the burden of shame. And also sometimes time And I won't say it heals all wounds, but it certainly heals some wounds. And yeah, time helps as well.
I really understand very much what trauma does. My entire life has been about understanding and healing from that and alchemizing that or that pain into self-love and love for others and into something positive rather than just folding and basically what my body would like to do, which is curl up in a corner and never come out.
Yes.
Um, so I really understand that. I understand what the nervous system does, and how it freezes you and it triggers you and forces you to have to feel the pain and to feel the feelings so that you can release them. Our whole platform is all about just airing these things and sharing them so that other people who are going through similar things in one way or another can understand that there's ways out and that there's tools and that pain is not necessarily something that you don't have to run from it and it can actually turn you into who you are.
Yeah, it can. It can. One of the things that has helped me over the years is also just recognizing that sometimes you don't get over it. Sometimes you just learn to live with it. And that was very freeing because so many narratives around
Hmm.
trauma are that you experience trauma, you get help, and then you're freed of it. And I'm sure that is a narrative that works for some people, but that has not been my experience. Sometimes you just can't get over it for whatever reason, and that's not a failing,
Hmm.
but learning to live with it and learning to thrive while having this thing that has shaped you, like that those two things are possible, that there is no singular narrative for how you get over trauma or learn to live with trauma, was also very helpful.
I so agree with that. And that's a place that I'm coming to more and more is just understanding that you embrace, you live side by side, you live together with all of your experiences. The actual denying and resistance of them is the thing that, in my experience, is the harder struggle. That when I embrace all of the parts of me and even the multiple endless parts of myself that are coming from trauma like betrayal, abandonment, feeling like nobody, I mean the millions of things that pop up constantly every minute every day, and making friends with those parts of me
Mhm.
is what actually calms me down. I just want to go back to one thing just in terms of finishing that, where you are right now in terms of your body, acceptance and healing from that moment.
I think it's an ongoing project of accepting myself and being okay with myself, but I just, yeah, I think it's an ongoing project. So, like healing from trauma, I don't know that there is any tidy closure to it, but I certainly have confronted a lot of the issues that I was running from, thankfully. I have recognized that certain decisions no longer serve me, that I'm an adult, and that I can take care of myself in different ways.
Like
Which,
what?
well, I don't have to, I don't need the fortress that I once needed. And so weight loss is rarely my goal, but I have certainly done things to lose weight, not for society by any stretch of the imagination, but just for myself to feel better in my body, to be more active, etc. So that kind of thing has been very helpful. But I have done it on my own terms. I don't like to talk about it. I don't like it's not newsworthy. It just is what it is. And I just try not to stress about it anymore. Like I'm 50 years old, whatever. I'm not going on the bikini. I'm never going to go shopping for a bikini again. I've never worn a bikini in my life, and I don't care. It just I like being old. It's awesome.
What do you like about it? I mean, you're not old, but anyway, yeah.
Well, I mean older. I think that I don't feel old like in the sort of granny sense of the word, but I would choose my 40s and thus far my 50s over my 20s and 30s any day of the week. My 40s were the best years of my life by far.
Why? I agree.
I just, you finally start to feel like you know something. You don't know everything, but you know something. And also you just start to care less.
I think you were talking about your nieces. I don't know. I was relating to what you were saying about them in terms of not taking no for an answer and understanding their power.
Yeah, my nieces are amazing. I learn a lot from them every single day. In fact, they're on their way to LA because we're going to see Beyonce on Monday.
Oh,
And
amazing.
yeah, I'm just so excited. And they are excited. They've been planning their Beyonce outfits for a very long time. And so they're so confident and they're so bright and so interesting. And they just don't know can't. They don't. And I really, really love that. It just is so admirable, especially in a world that wants girls to make themselves smaller, that wants girls to be intimidated, that wants girls to not dream for themselves. And it's sad to say that in 2025 when we were saying that in like 1865 and 1905 and
Yeah.
1955. I mean, things are better, and it's important, I think, to acknowledge we cannot compare how bad things are now to how bad things were, let's say, in the late 1800s when people that look like me were enslaved, or in the early 20th century when women's suffrage was not universal and all kinds of things. But that said, it's sad that we have to be grateful for what progress we have made, given how much progress we have yet to make. And so when I see my nieces and other young women of their age,
Hmm.
I just feel so much hope. And I rarely feel hope, but I look at them and that they are not yet broken by the world is very gratifying to see.
Why do you think they're like that?
They're raised very well. They're loved. It's not about like, when I say they're raised well, I mean they were raised with love. They're raised to care about other people. They're just so thoughtful. I give all credit to both their mothers and fathers and step parents, that these children have been sort of just shown one of the better ways of moving through the world. And that goes a long way. I think if more people were just raised with a little more
Mm.
love, we would see a lot better. Like, in addition to like the people currently in power, like they're never happy. They're never satisfied. They're trying to fill a
Mm-mm.
void within themselves that will never be filled. And
Hmm.
also, I think many of them were badly parented. And
100%, or you would never be that way. I mean,
correct.
period. You just,
When you look at some of these people, it's just like, oh my God, your daddy didn't love you.
hmm.
Well, there's a daddy out there for you now. Just go on like Grinder and like work that out. But they don't even want to hear that. They're not ready for that conversation, which, okay.
But we can give that to ourselves and
Oh,
create
yeah.
better people. And then that power is a power. I think that is what we're looking at right now. We're looking at that kind of change in awareness of power that is up to us, and it's the choices that we make. And among those choices is, self-love, but I'm not saying it from like this narcissistic bubble bath place or phony stupid place. I'm saying it from like really, because if you walk around in shame and with deep voids inside of yourself, you're incessantly wanting to break everything outside of you to conform to what you want. And that's what's happened. That's the world we're living in that's crumbling.
Hmm. It is. But I think that people will and are already doing the work of rebuilding and preserving the things that we should preserve.
Yes. When do you feel the most vulnerable?
When I'm writing, I think writing can be a very vulnerable act because you're putting your ideas into the world and you don't know how those ideas are going to be judged. And that can be very, that can be overwhelming. And so when I'm writing, when I'm trying out new things, when I'm really taking risks, that's when I feel the most vulnerable because that's what I care the most about, other than, of course, my family.
When do you feel the most beautiful?
I mean, not to be the wife guy or gal, but my wife is like super into me, and that's kind of new. And so when she looks at me, I do feel beautiful because like her eyes are shining, the whole thing. And I feel like I reciprocate that look because she's mega hot. But I genuinely feel beautiful in those moments, and it's the first time in my life I've ever felt beautiful.
And that love also probably happened because you were ready to.
I was ready. I wish that we had met sooner, only because I would love more time with her. I'm 50 and she is 63. And um, I don't think either of us feel 50 and 63 in the way that I used to think of those ages. But I also
Hmm.
know that if I had met her in my 30s or 20s, I would not have known what to do with like someone
Right.
like that. I would have just been like, I don't know. I wouldn't have been able to receive the love that she gives me and to appreciate it as much. So
Oh,
I think everything happens when it happens for a reason.
that's amazing.
Yeah, it is.
And was it love at first sight?
Um, it was as close to love at first sight as you can get, I would say. For her it was, but that's because she knew who I was before we met. And she's the one who pursued me, and that had never happened before. But when I did meet her, I was like, yeah, I think something could happen here. But I didn't know what. And after so many romantic disappointments and if not bad, then just sort of ho hum relationships, I just didn't want to get excited. I was just like, I'll go on this date with you, sure. Um, I just didn't want to get my hopes up. I didn't want to get too invested in something because I had, spent too much time like getting overexcited and overeager. So I admittedly kind of held myself back and just took it slow. And to her credit, she gave me the space to take it slow. Well, lesbian slow, which is not that slow. But
What does that mean?
in lesbian years, like we've been together a lifetime. But lesbians tend to move pretty quickly from zero to moving in together, and we did not. And I think our relationship is the better for it, for sure. And I just am grateful that I met her at a time in my life when I could know that I have every right to ask for the time I needed to match her level.
Hmm. Wow. That's a very uplifting, beautiful story. Thank you for that. I heard someone say the other day how lucky one is, if not lucky, even just blessed that someone loves you so much that if you were not here, their life would be empty.
Yeah, absolutely. And it is a blessing because, a lot of my younger relationships, I tended to be a bit, or not a lot, codependent, like just thinking, I can't survive without you. We have to do everything together. If you're not constantly reaffirming me, then we must not have anything. And there were a lot of reasons for that. But with Debbie, we both travel extensively for our careers. So, like, when she's gone, the house is absolutely empty. She is, when she's
Mm.
gone, I realize she sings all the time and she makes noise all the time. Like, right now, she's on book tour. And, like, I keep looking at our dog, like, I don't know who's going to talk to us tonight, but I guess it's just you and me, pup. Let's turn on the TV for some company. And it's fine. Like, I go about my business, and, distance does make the heart grow fonder, but it is always just this, like, sort of bittersweet preview of, like, oh my gosh, she fills this house with so much life. And when she's
Mm.
gone, it's not that the life is completely gone because I'm here and, I have some verve to me, but it's just emptier. And I'm glad that I can appreciate that.
And what does self acceptance mean to you?
I think that self acceptance is just being okay with who you are and where you're at and knowing that you're doing the best that you can most of the time. I think that we put so much pressure on self acceptance, and why? To what end, really?
Hmm.
And I do think it can be important, but sometimes you just struggle with that, and that's okay. I always just I just try to believe that I'm doing the best I can, and like not every day is going to be perfect in terms of self acceptance, and
Hmm.
that's okay. Like that's what I accept. That it's just
Hmm.
It's just not something like once you have self-acceptance, it's a permanent condition. Of course,
Mm-mm.
it isn't. And that,
Mm-mm. That's just the commodified version of it. It's not the
yeah,
real version of it. All of
absolutely.
this gets ruined by the commodification of
It
everything.
does. And
It's
I wish we could have better conversations around it because I do think self-acceptance and fat acceptance and body neutrality and body positivity, fat positivity, etc. These are all incredibly important things. But the Instagrammed versions of them do not
hmm
account for the realities of our lived experiences. And I I just wish that we could sort of separate the commodification of
hmm
acceptance from the actual experience of it.
hmm What's your biggest fear?
Well, I don't have any biggest fears anymore because my biggest fear was my mom dying and she died. So yeah, I'm
Mm,
just like, well, nothing matters. But it's new, so I'll get over it.
I'm so sorry.
Yeah, me too. She's great. And so I miss her very much.
What was
And
great about her?
she was very much who she was. She was very unapologetic about who she was. She was not perfect by any stretch of the imagination. But even though, like, of course, you always have tensions, we had a very good relationship. And it took a long time to get there. And she was never going to change. I'm the one who changed and just realized, you know what? Just accept her. That's who she is. And being able to just sort of recognize that she did the best she could with the skills that she had, like the same sort of self-acceptance that I try to bring to myself, I offered to her, especially once she was diagnosed
hmm
with cancer. And she was very exacting in her standards and very strict, as a parent when I was young. And then when you would ask her, one day my parents were interviewed by Entertainment Tonight, of all things, for this feature they were doing on families with multiple successful children. And the interviewer asked them, would you guys change anything about how you parented your children? And they looked dead in the camera and at the same time were like, no. And
Oh,
I just
wow.
laughed my ass off. I was just like, are you fucking serious? And I have to say, it just made me respect them in a way that they were like, no, we would do it exactly the same way again. While my brothers and I are like, really? Nothing would change? And so I just like that she really walked her walk, right or wrong. She stood by her convictions. She's
Mm.
a Haitian woman of a certain age, and they're to be reckoned with. And so I respect the hell out of her. And also, she was very, very funny, and she was very generous. She was very kind. And so, when you like, that's my biggest fear was like, what would we do if she died?
Mm.
So now I don't think I have a biggest fear anymore, other than, of course, like the fascist encroachment that's going on.
Right. She wasn't a people pleaser.
No, she was literally the opposite. But she was kind. I mean, that's the
Yeah,
thing.
well, people
She
pleasing is
wasn't
is actually not kind. So,
correct. She wasn't mean in any way. And it has been very interesting in the past 2 months to see how respected she is, like the number of people that have come out of the woodwork to pay their respects and to share some story. Like, turns out she had this whole sort of secret life of doing, she worked as a Haitian immigrant. She did a lot of work with various nonprofits to help immigrants acclimatize to the United States. And turns out she had this whole secret life that we didn't even know about that went well beyond what we thought she was doing. And like people that she put through school, people who she sent clothes to who didn't
mm,
have clothes, and like she never ever talked about it. You just
mm,
would never know.
mm,
And that's just who she was. And
mm.
I only hope that I leave the world with half as much respect as she did.
I know it's like a dying kind of way of being, just
It is. It is. It is. And it doesn't have to be that way at all. Um, so hopefully we can resurrect it in some way.
yeah. What's your wildest dream?
Um, My wildest personal dream is to write something worthy of a Pulitzer. My
Mm.
wildest sort of dream for humanity is that I don't know that peace is ever possible as long as humans are involved, but man, I wish that we would take better care of the most vulnerable populations in our communities. I do.
We have to.
Yes, we do. And so that's my wildest dream.
There is no choice. That is our only choice.
I agree.
And as re the Pulitzer, what are your why and what are your thoughts around that? And that's a beautiful dream. Can we just hear a
I
little bit more
mean,
about
why?
that?
Because having been a judge on prize juries, including the Pulitzer, I know how the sausage is made. And so excellence does matter, but sometimes it's just lots and lots of interpersonal dynamics and so on. So I know that we should not put all our, like that prizes, we love to say they don't
No,
matter, but they matter. Otherwise, they
validation
wouldn't
matter.
exist. It's just like, I
Yeah,
think the
being
valid
seen, being seen.
I think the validation would be nice. The validation that, because a lot of people do not care for my work. And a lot,
Really?
oh yeah. And that's okay. It's okay. I'm not for everybody. And a lot of people, I think, dismiss the amount of intellectual rigor that's in my work and pretend it's, or believe it's not there when
Really?
that's not
God.
the case. And so it would be validation that I have done something good. And I don't know that it will happen. I don't know that my peers respect me in that way, but
Hmm.
I would like it someday.
Funny. From the outside, that is not perceptible at all. From the
Oh,
outside, you're a giant, giantly respected. It's so interesting how people, ugh, yeah, like just, it's just so interesting. I don't know,
yeah.
you just don't realize, or
Mhm.
like the amount of people that look up to you and the amount that you've accomplished is oh my God. I was looking at everything the other day and I was like, wow. Um, like, yeah, I don't know. It's, these things, it just around awards and stuff like that. I will say this is vulnerable for me to say, but I will say it. Sometimes I think, I'm like, why am I not invited to that thing? Like,
Of course.
millions of people have written me about the work that we've done and how much it's changed their life, and people have grown up with it since they've been 12 years old and watch these videos over and over and over. It's had an impact.
Hmm.
And yet there's no acknowledgement from the
Hmm.
establishment. Or the status quo. Zero.
Yeah. I hear that from a few people who have done just truly like long standing, groundbreaking, people impacting work. And it's always interesting to see what the establishment and what the gatekeepers acknowledge and let through and what they don't. Sometimes it just makes me sad because I always, when I'm talking to my students and the people I mentor, I just tell them to approach the writing community from a place of abundance, that there's room for
Mm.
everyone at the table, no matter what the gatekeepers tell us. We may not have the portion of the table that we want, but there is room. Like Tom Jones over there did not get your book deal. Tom Jones got Tom Jones's book deal, etc. I try to always tell people that, but man, to get everyone on the same page about abundance and recognizing that we're not
Hmm.
doing the same things. We're not taking away from each other. We're just doing what we're meant to be doing. And it's hard to get people to believe that sometimes.
I think about that all the time, and especially, and in order to keep going, I just, I just go, okay, then this is just the lesson. More lesson to just believe. More lesson to just, if you touch one person, more lesson that it doesn't matter, and it makes you stronger, and it makes you have more belief in you, which is no one can take that away.
Yes, that's very true.
Yeah. So last question, you're so generous and thank you so much, is what would you tell your younger self to never change about the way you are?
My eyebrows. Um, I would tell my younger self to never change my love for writing. Just don't ever compromise on it, and don't ever let anyone deter you from the idea that you could be a writer. Especially in this world, it's very hard to, especially when you're young and you say you want to do something creative, people always try to like gatekeep it or poo poo it and say you can't make a living as a writer. Well, yeah, maybe not, but you can't make a living as much of anything anymore. So, like, why not do something you love doing while you're not making the living you deserve to make? And so I would just tell myself, stay the course.
Yes, stay the course, and then going back to abundance. Just, I think that it will come. Like it comes.
It does. And
It comes.
the thing I always try to remind myself and others is that you don't get to control what comes. Just know that it does.
Right. Exactly. This was very beautiful, and I appreciate all of your time. And I can't wait for the Pulitzer. And it's going to be part of my dream that you get a Pulitzer. So
Thank you. I appreciate it, and I appreciate the conversation.
thank you. Me too.